Hello everyone, my name is Anmol and today we will be talking about concurrency patterns in Python. In this talk, we will talk about what is concurrency, what are the various patterns for concurrency, and how you can implement them in Python. Now, since this is a very brief talk, we won't go into the code of each of these concurrency patterns in detail, but we will give you a general high-level overview of how each one of them are implemented. So let's get started. What is concurrency? So concurrency is the art of dealing with multiple things at once. So imagine a normal day use case where you're using your smartphone, and on your smartphone maybe you're texting a friend while you're listening to music, and in the background some movie is being downloaded. Now all of these operations happen at the same time. No one process makes you wait while the other process finishes. Your music doesn't stop playing when you text a friend, and this in programming is known as concurrency. This is a very essential skill to master, and the reason we need it so much in Python especially is because Python in itself is very slow. So here is a graph comparing speed of various programming languages in implementing a function that calculates pi. Now, as you can see, as compared to programming languages such as Golang, C, C++, Java, Ruby, R, Python, or the normal implementation of Python is the slowest of the bunch. So let's look at how we can speed that up. Now there are various flavors in which concurrency comes in, but some of them are natively supported in Python through the standard library itself, such as threads and locks and coroutines. These can be used by importing simple packages such as concurrent.features, threading, or async IO, while there are other concurrency patterns that are not very well supported by Python, that such as software transactional memory or the actor model. These models of concurrency might require you to add some additional library to your code, or maybe they might require a different version of flavor of Python itself. So let's look at them one by one. Now the first one here is threads. Now you can imagine threads as a bunch of instructions, and all of these instructions are executed one after the other in a flow, and um, the way the place where it excels is that multiple threads can execute at the same time. And when I say execute at the same time, let me also tell you what happens in the background. When you execute multiple threads at the same time, the CPU is switching between these threads in a very smart manner. It basically allows a thread to run a particular amount of time. Let's say it allows a process to a thread to run for 10 milliseconds, and after that 10 millisecond, it takes away the control from that thread and allows any other thread to use it. This kind of context switching is known as preemptive multitasking, and here the programmer does not have a very high level control, a lot of control over how threads are executed. Now, since we don't know which thread is executing at a particular point of time in execution, it might lead to some drawbacks as well, such as race conditions. So in a race condition, what happens is, imagine a scenario where multiple threads are trying to access a same variable or a shared resource. Maybe let's say something like a database connection, or maybe a variable. Let's for understanding, let's take a scenario where multiple threads are trying to access a variable and are trying to increment it. So two threads are running and they both want to increment a variable. Now from a CPU's perspective, an increment operation can be broken down into three parts: reading the variable, incrementing the variable, and updating the variable. Now in between of any of these three operations, if let's say another thread comes in for execution and the CPU releases the control to give it control to then update the variable, what might happen is we might still get a result at the end, but it might not be very correct one. So maybe incrementing 1 twice might only result in a value of 2. This kind of conditions can be very tricky for programmers to identify, but once a programmer identifies them, they can very easily be fixed. So the way we deal with these cases is through the use of locks. What locks does is it limits access to a resource by a thread. So let's say we want to update a variable, but before updating a variable, we acquire the access to that variable by putting a lock on it. So only one thread can access that variable as long as it has that lock, and other threads will have to wait until that lock has been released. By using that mechanism, we can avoid these race conditions. But there is a downside to locks, that is deadlocks. So what happens is, if let's say for some reason a lot of threads are end up in a condition where they are waiting for one other to finish. So one thread is waiting for some other thread to finish, then some other thread is waiting for some other thread to finish, and while that third thread is waiting for the first thread to finish. In that condition, we form a cyclic chain of dependency, which is known as deadlock. And these deadlock can result our program to end up in a hung state where all of the threads are waiting for one another, and this is a very big downside. Now there is no way to resolve a deadlock, but so the programmer has to be very smart about these conditions when coding. Um, these Taking these into consideration, the programmer has to make sure that the program is thread safe when implementing the thread module. Now let's take a look at how threading is implemented in Python. The way threading is implemented is you can pass any function to the thread function and its argument, and create a thread object. Now what happens is this thread does not execute till you start the operations, meaning that it will wait um, for the programmer to explicitly specify that it wants to execute that thread. This allows us to also execute multiple threads at the same time. Um, so now let's talk about something else. Let's talk about something very important called as global interpreter lock. Now, in a previous example, when I talked about threading, um, what happens is, uh, even though multiple things are being dealt at the same time, they are not executing at the same time. And why is this happening is because Python has something called as global interpreter lock. Now, this global interpreter lock allows Python to run as a single process, so it only has access to a single processor. What that means is, in a normal modern day computer where you might have a dual core or a quad core processor, Python runs on only one of those. So this is a very big limitation, that we are not able to use the full extent of the system resources in threading. Um, Now let's look at a way of how to get ahead of this. The way you get ahead of this in Python is through parallelism. Now, um, parallelization is different from concurrency in a very basic manner. What that means is, in a concurrence program where operations are executed one after the other, but no two operations are happening at the same time, in a parallel program, two operations can happen simultaneously at the same time. What that does, so when we implement parallelization in Python, we can basically say that a code is can be divided into multiple processes, and each of these processes gets its own system resources, meaning that if we, let's say, define two processes, each process gets control over a single CPU core, and it can then execute it. However, so we can execute multiple things at the same time. However, this comes with a limitation. That limitation is that in a modern day system, um, we can only execute two processes from a single core. So let's say you have a quad core system, then you can only execute a maximum of 8 parallel uh, processes at the same time. In Python, we implement parallelism through two modules, that is concurrent.features and multiprocessing. Concurrent.features allows us a high level interface to interact with parallelization, but you can also do it through multiprocessing. Now let's come to a second way of implementing concurrency, that is through coroutines. Now, unlike threads, where we don't get a lot of control over how the program is executing and which process executes first or second, or which how the control of execution flows, here we have a lot of control over its execution, and this is a way to do non-preemptive multitasking. In Python, it is implemented through async IO library, and the way it is being supported in Python from Python 3.5 and above. Now, um, you can get full support of coroutines through async IO library following from 3 version 3.7. We have very good support for async IO library. Now the way we use coroutines is through the use of two main keywords, that is async and await. Whenever you add async as a prefix to any function in Python, it becomes a coroutine. And what it means is that any function defined as coroutine cannot execute outside the event loop. What is event loop, you ask? Now, just like threading, when you define a thread and it is not executed, in a similar fashion, when you define a coroutine and you call it, it isn't immediately executed. It or when you call a coroutine, it becomes a future, and that future then needs to be executed in an event loop, run in an event loop for it to be executed. So um, the way we control the flow of execution in coroutines is through the keyword await. Now what await does is, it says to a program that you have to wait for this operation to finish. Whenever you prepend the keyword await in front of any operation, the program then has to wait for that operation to finish until its execution. Um, so let's say you define a coroutine, and you now want to wait till that coroutine is finished. You can define it as await and then followed by that coroutine, and when you call that event loop little bit during execution, it will wait for that coroutine to finish before proceeding further. Now you can also execute multiple coroutines at the same time using a functionality of tasks. So you can schedule multiple coroutines to run at the same time um, through through the mechanism of async IO. Now we won't go very deep into how coroutines work because it's a very tricky way, but it gives you a very a lot of control over execution without giving you a lot of drawbacks such as race conditions or things like deadlocks. So um, speaking further, the third concurrency pattern is software transactional memory. Now, unlike the previous two concurrency patterns, such as threads and coroutines, software transactional memory takes away of um, uh, the complexity of implementing concurrent programming by allowing the program to choose which operations can be executed concurrently. Basically, in the background, what it does is it acts like a database, and just like in a database where you have asset properties, uh, each operation is implemented as a transaction, and each transaction needs to be validated before proceeding, and if one transaction fails, then it rollbacks to its original state. So all this is implemented under the hood, and you don't get to see a lot of complexity while implementing your code in a software transactional memory. Unfortunately though, software transactional memory is not natively supported in Python, and in order for us to use software transactional memory in Python, we have to use a fork of Python called PyPy. In PyPy, you can use the standard library of PyPy STM in order to use software transactional memory. Since PyPy gets rid of the global interpreter lock and implements software transactional memory, it is a very good way to speed up your programs without a lot of complexity. Now the final concurrency pattern that we are going to talk about today is actor model. So in actor model, basically we define actors which act as a containers, and basically what we are doing is we are segregating identity and state. Basically we are saying that we can sort of distinguish between an operation and the data. So consider each actor as a set of operations, a set of instructions, and it is contained inside a container. Now that container allows it to receive data and execute that or execute operation on that data, or create another actor to execute that data, or change its internal state. Now this is a very good mechanism for implementing concurrency, but since actor model are implemented outside of the normal programming languages paradigms, these are very heavy operations, and these can oftentimes slow down your program even though they are very elegant to use. In Python you can use actor model if you want through the library Thespian and Thespian, and it's a very good way to use concurrency. Now how now we have reached the end of our slides, but let's say you have done everything that you can to speed up your program through concurrency. How do you go further? So beyond concurrency, you can only do two things. You can get a better system, or you can get multiple systems. Let's talk about each one of them. Getting a better system. So what getting a better system means is, so there's something called as hardware based parallelization. In your normal system, you might have something called as GPU, which is the graphics processing unit. And what the graphics processing unit or certain circuits allows you to do is basically you take one instruction and you apply it to a series of data points. This is extremely helpful in scientific communities or analytics works to execute a lot of things at the same time. So when a GPU is rendering your graphics, it is basically doing the same operation, single operation, on a lot of data. So when you turn your camera, it has to change certain values for the entire frame, and this is how computers use hardware based parallelization, but you can also do the same for your programs as well. The way you can use hardware based parallelization through a graphics processing unit in your system is through two things. One is a library called as CUDA. Now CUDA is a general purpose graphics processing unit, graphics processing library, and it allows you to interact with the with the GPU and add your own operations to it. It is a general purpose library, and it is available by the vendor NVIDIA. NVIDIA also provides us with a second software that is called Rapids. Now Rapids is a while CUDA is a low level library, Rapids is a very high level library. it allows you to do a lot of modern day analytic um, processes or scientific processes with very ease, to like how you similarly would do with a pandas library or a numpy library. Now these two are very highly effective in case your computations are mostly mathematical or complex. In case you can't implement hardware-based parallelization, there is also an option to get more systems. What we mean by getting more systems is setting up a big data architecture. Now, um, in a big data architecture, uh, basically there are certain techniques that allow you to process data, such as MapReduce, and in the modern day, we also have certain Lambda architectures. What MapReduce does is it inverts the flow of execution by sending your data to the by sending your program to the data rather than sending your data to the program. So each computer might store a certain set of data, and basically you send certain operations to that data for it to be executed and then aggregate the results uh, to get your final output. This is very commonly in use in big data, such big data software such as Hadoop, and um, also you can find variations of these, such as a Spark, but all these Spark and some modern day use cases also come under Lambda architectures. Now what Lambda architectures allows you to do is um, it's sort of an upgrade to MapReduce, but basically it allows you with a lot of flexibility. You can set up your pipelines, and what you do is basically you take your data and send them through pipeline, um, using things like Kafka, and through the message broking, then you can leverage the computation power and execute them, or execute your operations on multiple systems. So you can very easily find them on AWS, or even you can set it up your own, set it up yourself also. So these are two ways that you can implement a big data architecture. Now we won't go too deep into it, but you can research more about them. Um, Finally, now um, now that our presentation comes to an end, I would like to give you some references for you to go ahead and read further on this. Now, one of the best resources that I have found myself is this book called Seven Concurrency Patterns in 7 Weeks by Paul Butcher. This is a very good book, but it's unfortunately it's not written for Python itself. It talks about a lot of concurrency patterns and concepts that we covered today, but mostly you can find it code in Python or in a language called as Clojure. Um, if you want a Pythonic version of it, you can refer to Yin Wong's blog post, in which he refers to the same book, but um, sees the different ways that Python implement it. Um, you can search for it online. Or the third way that you can third resource that I would like to link to is Jeff Anderson's post on realpython.com, and it is a very extensive blog post covering Python concurrency using async IO and threading module. So with that, our presentation comes to an end. Thank you all for tuning in, and if you want to stay connected with me, or maybe want to have some questions, you can connect with me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. These are my handles. So thank you, and hope you have a good day.